The ache had a name, a voice, and a specific scent of vanilla and lavender that clung to the cushions of their shared sofa. For 2 years, 7 months, and what felt like a lifetime of days, Clara had been in love with Maya. It was a quiet, insidious kind of love, one that had grown in the silent spaces between conversations, in the shared glances over morning coffee, and in the comfortable quiet of movie nights. It was a love that lived in her ribs, a caged and frantic bird that beat its wings against her bones every time Maya laughed. And right now, it was a particularly sharp and agonizing pain, a physical twisting in her gut that mimicked the knot of Maya's brow as she spoke. "I just don't understand him, you know?" Maya said, her voice a fraying rope. She was curled at the opposite end of the sofa, a plush gray blanket pulled up to her chin, her beautiful face a canvas of confusion and hurt. Her eyes, the color of warm honey, were fixed on some distant point beyond the living room wall, a place where, presumably, answers to the enigma of her boyfriend, Ben, resided. One minute he's telling me I'm everything he's ever wanted, and the next, it's like I'm a ghost. Like I'm speaking a language he can't be bothered to learn. Clara nodded, a slow, practiced motion of sympathy. She was an expert at this. She was the supportive friend, the steady shoulder, the keeper of secrets, and the mender of heartbreaks that were not her own, but felt like they were. She listened to the tales of Ben's emotional distance, his thoughtless comments, his forgotten anniversaries, and with every word, a selfish, terrible hope bloomed in her chest, a poisonous flower she immediately tried to crush. She hated herself for it, for the part of her that celebrated every crack in their foundation, but the feeling was relentless. "He's just busy," Clara offered, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. It was the same hollow comfort she always offered, the one Maya needed to hear to get through another week. It was a lie, and they both knew it on some level. Ben wasn't busy, he was indifferent. "Busy," Maya repeated, the word hollow and brittle. She finally looked at Clara, and the full force of her unhappiness hit Clara like a physical blow. It was in the slight downturn of her lips, the exhaustion that shadowed her eyes. "Is that what this is? Or am I just not enough to be a priority?" The question hung in the air, thick and heavy. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs, a desperate drumbeat. "You are more than enough. You are everything." The words screamed in her head, so loud she was terrified Maya might hear them. But she swallowed them down, burying them deep where all the other unspeakable truths lived. "Of course you're enough, May," she said, her voice softer than she intended. "Don't ever think that. He's the one who's not seeing what's right in front of him." And that, at least, was the truest thing she had ever said. Maya was a supernova of a person, vibrant and warm, pulling everyone into her orbit with an effortless gravity. She painted in messy, brilliant strokes of color. She cooked with a chaotic energy that always resulted in something delicious, and she laughed from her belly, a sound that could make flowers grow. To be loved by Maya, Clara imagined, would be like standing in the sun forever. Ben, in her opinion, was living in a perpetual eclipse and complaining about the chill. Maya gave a small, watery smile, and it did nothing to reach her eyes. "You always know what to say," she shifted, her sock-clad foot brushing against Clara's calf. The contact was electric, a jolt that shot straight up Clara's spine and settled as a warm thrumming in her chest. She fought the urge to flinch away, to protect herself from the casual intimacy that meant nothing to Maya and everything to her. Instead, she held her breath, anchoring herself to the moment, to the fleeting touch that she would later replay in her mind 100 times. "It's my job," Clara said, forcing a light tone. Official best friend and Ben interpreter. Maya's smile widened slightly, becoming a little more genuine. "I'd be lost without you." "And I am lost with you," Clara thought, the situational irony a bitter pill. Here she was, the architect of her own misery, dispensing relationship advice to the woman she loved about a man who was patently wrong for her. It was a special kind of hell, one furnished with comfortable sofas and the scent of Maya's favorite chamomile tea. The conversation meandered as it always did, circling back to the same painful truths. Maya deserved more. Ben was incapable of giving it. They would fight, they would make up, and the cycle would continue. Clara felt like a spectator at a tragedy she had seen too many times, powerless to change the ending. Her role was fixed, to offer a hand to pull Maya back from the ledge, but never to suggest she could just walk away and find a different view. Because suggesting that would require explaining why, and the why was a secret locked so tightly in Clara's heart that she feared it would stop beating if it ever escaped. Later that night, long after Maya had retreated to her bedroom with a final, weary sigh, Clara lay awake in her own bed. The wall between their rooms felt both impossibly thin and 1,000 miles thick. She could hear the faint rustle of sheets as Maya tossed and turned, and she imagined the path of tears on her friend's cheeks. The urge to go to her, to wrap her arms around her and tell her everything would be okay, to tell her that she would make everything okay, was a physical force, a tide pulling her from the shore of her self-control. But she resisted. She always resisted. Friendship was a fragile, precious thing. It was the foundation of her entire world. What she had with Maya, the easy laughter, the shared secrets, the profound, unwavering support, was real and tangible. It was a safe harbor. The love she felt, this wild, romantic, terrifying love, was a storm that could wreck it all. The risk was too great. Losing Maya as a friend would be an extinction-level event for her soul. So she stayed in her bed, a silent guardian, and sent wishes for peace into the darkness, hoping they might somehow cross the space between their rooms and settle over the woman sleeping, or not sleeping, on the other side. She clutched her pillow, burying her face in the cool cotton, and allowed herself a single, selfish thought. She imagined a different world, a parallel life where she was the one Maya came home to, not as a friend, but as an anchor. A world where Maya's smiles were for her, where her casual touches were not casual at all, but deliberate and full of meaning. A world where the words, "I love you," were not followed by a platonic, "You're the best friend ever." It was a beautiful, painful fantasy. And as sleep finally began to claim her, she whispered the words into her pillow, a confession for an audience of one. "I love you, Maya." The sound was swallowed by the fabric, by the night, a secret kept safe for one more day. The stasis of their lives, this painful equilibrium, held for another few weeks. Clara continued to play her part, the ever-present, ever-supportive friend. She helped Maya pick out an outfit for a date night that was meant to fix things with Ben. She listened to the strained, post-mortem analysis of that same date, how Ben had been on his phone for half of it, how the conversation had felt like a job interview. Each story was another small cut, another twist of the knife that was permanently lodged in her side. She was bleeding out slowly, and no one could see the wound. She tried to build walls, to put a little distance between them for her own sanity. She'd make excuses to stay late at the library where she worked as a research assistant, burying herself in dusty archives and the quiet scent of aging paper. She'd take up jogging, pushing her body until her lungs burned and the ache in her chest was purely physical, a welcome replacement for the emotional one. But it was like trying to hold back the ocean with a sieve. Maya was her gravity. She would always, always be pulled back into her orbit. A text message would appear, "Brought you a latte, it's getting cold." Or Maya would show up at the library just before closing, a hopeful smile on her face. "Thought you might want to ride home," and all of Clara's carefully constructed defenses would crumble into dust. She would get in the car, inhale the familiar vanilla lavender scent, and the whole cycle would begin again. She was trapped, a willing prisoner in a jail of her own making. One Tuesday evening, the world tilted on its axis. It began with the sound of the front door opening and closing with uncharacteristic force, a slam that echoed through their small apartment. Clara was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of tomato sauce, the scent of garlic and basil filling the air. She froze, spoon hovering over the pot. Maya never slammed doors. Then came the sound of a choked sob. Clara's heart seized. She turned off the stove and rushed into the living room. Maya was standing just inside the doorway, her keys still clutched in her hand, her shoulders shaking. Her face was pale, streaked with tears, her honey-colored eyes wide with a pain so raw it stole Clara's breath. "May?" Clara whispered, taking a tentative step forward. What is it? What happened? Maya looked up, and her composure shattered completely. A gut-wrenching wail tore from her throat, and she collapsed into Clara's arms, her body racked with violent sobs. Clara stumbled back a step from the force of it, her arms coming around Maya automatically, holding her tight. It's over, Maya gasped, her words muffled against Clara's shoulder. He ended it. He said he's been feeling this way for months. Months, Clara. He said he thinks he's been stringing me along. Clara's mind went blank with a strange, conflicting mixture of incandescent rage at Ben and a dizzying, shameful surge of relief. She crushed the relief instantly, focusing on the woman trembling in her arms. She held Maya tighter, her hand coming up to stroke her hair, murmuring soft, meaningless words of comfort. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. He's an idiot. He's a fool. They stood there for a long time, locked in an embrace in the middle of the living room, while the tomato sauce grew cold on the stove. Maya cried until she had no tears left, until her sobs subsided into shuddering, exhausted breaths. Clara's shirt was soaked, but she didn't care. She just held on, her own heart aching in sympathy, her mind racing. This was it. The catalyst. The moment the old world ended and a new, terrifying and uncertain one began. She guided Maya to the sofa, the same sofa where so many of their painful conversations had taken place. She sat beside her, never letting go, her arm a steady presence around Maya's shoulders. Maya leaned into her, her head resting on Clara's shoulder, her breathing slowly evening out. The weight of her was both a comfort and a torment. It was everything Clara had ever wanted, born from the one thing she never wanted for Maya, this profound, heart-wrenching pain. He said he felt like we were just roommates, Maya whispered into the fabric of Clara's sweater, her voice raspy and broken. That there was no spark. That he was just going through the motions. Clara bit her lip to keep from saying all the things she wanted to say. Of course there was no spark, you were trying to light a fire with wet wood. He was never your match. Instead, she just said, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't deserve you. They sat in silence for a while, the only sounds in the room the hum of the refrigerator and Maya's shaky breaths. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the floor and bathing the room in a soft, melancholy orange light. Clara watched the dust motes dance in the fading sunbeams, each one a tiny, floating world of possibility. Finally, Maya stirred, lifting her head from Clara's shoulder. Her eyes were red-rimmed and puffy, but a flicker of something new was there, something Clara couldn't quite name. It looked almost like clarity. Can I ask you something stupid? Maya asked, her voice barely audible. You can ask me anything, Clara replied instantly, her heart giving a nervous flutter. Maya turned to face her fully, her knee brushing against Clara's. She didn't pull away. Can I stay with you tonight? In your room? I really don't want to be alone. The request was a lightning strike, short-circuiting every thought in Clara's brain. Her room. Her bed. The small, sacred space that was hers alone, where she had dreamt of Maya for nearly 3 years. It was a terrifying, exhilarating proposition. It crossed a line, a boundary of friendship they had never approached before. Saying yes felt like stepping off a cliff. Saying no felt impossible. Of course, Clara heard herself say, her voice sounding distant, as if it belonged to someone else. Of course you can. Maya's shoulders sagged with relief, and she offered a fragile, grateful smile that made Clara's heart ache all over again. The world had indeed tilted, and Clara had the distinct feeling that it would never be set right again. She was falling, and she didn't know if there was a safety net below, or just a long, long drop into the unknown. And in that moment, staring into Maya's wrecked and beautiful face, she realized she didn't care. She would fall. For Maya, she would fall. The hours that followed were a blur of quiet domesticity, charged with an undercurrent of unspoken emotion so thick Clara felt she could barely breathe. She reheated the sauce and boiled some pasta, and they ate in near silence at the small kitchen table. Maya barely touched her food, pushing the noodles around her plate with a fork. Clara ate mechanically, her stomach a tight knot of anxiety. The usual easy chatter that filled their apartment was gone, replaced by a heavy, fragile quiet. After dinner, Clara ran a bath for Maya, adding a liberal amount of the lavender-scented Epsom salts she knew Maya loved. While Maya soaked, Clara went into her own bedroom and tried to prepare. She changed the sheets, smoothing out every wrinkle with trembling hands. She fluffed the pillows. She tidied the stack of books on her nightstand, her fingers brushing over the worn spines of her favorite poetry collections. The room felt too small, too intimate, too full of her own secrets. Maya's presence in her bed was a prospect that was both a dream come true and a nightmare of self-control. When Maya emerged from the bathroom, wrapped in a fluffy white towel, her hair damp and curling around her face, Clara's breath caught in her throat. She looked ethereal and vulnerable, scrubbed clean of her makeup and her heartbreak, her skin glowing in the soft lamplight. Clara quickly looked away, her cheeks flushing, and handed Maya one of her own oversized t-shirts and a pair of soft cotton pajama pants. "Thanks," Maya murmured, taking the clothes. Her fingers brushed against Clara's, a fleeting touch that sent a familiar jolt through her system. Clara retreated while Maya changed, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "This is just friendly," she told herself sternly. Her heart is broken, and she needs her best friend. That is all this is. Do not make it more. It was a mantra she repeated over and over, a desperate attempt to cage the wild hope that was threatening to break free. When she re-entered the room, Maya was already in the bed, tucked under the covers on the side closest to the wall. She looked small in the queen-sized frame, her eyes following Clara as she moved around the room, turning off the main light and switching on the small, dim lamp on the nightstand. Clara hesitated for a moment, then slid into the bed on the other side, maintaining a careful, deliberate distance between them. The space felt like a chasm. The air was thick with the scent of lavender and soap and Maya, a combination that was intoxicating and deeply unsettling. She lay on her back, staring at the ceiling, every nerve in her body hyper-aware of the other person in her bed. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Clara could hear the soft sound of Maya's breathing, could feel the subtle shift of the mattress as she moved. The silence stretched, pulling taut between them. Clara's mind raced. Was this a mistake? Had she crossed a line she could never uncross? Was Maya feeling as strange about this as she was? "Clara." Maya's voice was a whisper in the dark, so soft Clara almost thought she'd imagined it. "Yeah," she whispered back, her voice tight. "Thank you," Maya said. "For this. For everything." "Always," Clara replied, the word feeling both wholly inadequate and profoundly true. There was another pause, and then Maya shifted, turning onto her side to face Clara. Clara remained on her back, her eyes still fixed on the ceiling, feeling Maya's gaze on her in the darkness. "Can I ask you another question?" Maya asked, her voice still a low whisper. "Of course. Do you think it's possible to love someone, to really, truly love them, but still feel like something is missing?" The question was a direct hit, striking right at the heart of Clara's own secret turmoil. It was also, she suspected, the key to understanding everything about Maya and Ben. Her heart started to beat a little faster. This was new territory. This wasn't about Ben's flaws. This was about something deeper. Clara finally turned her head on the pillow to look at Maya. In the dim light from the lamp, she could just make out the earnest, searching expression on her face. "Yes," Clara said, her voice barely more than a breath. "I think that's possible. I think sometimes you can love the idea of a person or the comfort they represent, but your souls don't connect on the level they need to." Maya was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. "My soul," she repeated softly, as if testing the word. "Ben and I, we never talked about things like that. We never talked about anything, really. Not anything important. Not like this." The unspoken addendum, "not like we do," hung in the air between them, shimmering and dangerous. Clara's breath hitched. She could feel the conversation shifting, moving from the safe ground of analyzing Maya's breakup into a more treacherous, uncharted landscape. "What do you think real love is supposed to feel like?" Maya asked, her voice full of a genuine, almost childlike curiosity. Clara's mind flooded with images, with feelings, with 1,000 unspoken poems she had written in her head about Maya. Love, to her, was the feeling of safety in Maya's presence. It was the way her heart leaped when Maya laughed. It was the effortless comfort of their silences. It was the fierce, protective urge she felt whenever Maya was hurting. It was wanting to know every thought, every dream, every fear that crossed her mind. It was this, right here, lying in the dark and talking about souls. She struggled to find the words, to describe the universe she felt without giving herself away. "I think it's supposed to feel easy," she began slowly, choosing her words with care. "Not that it's never hard work, but the connection itself should be effortless. It should feel like coming home. It should be with someone who sees all of you, the messy parts and the brilliant parts, and isn't scared of either. It's quiet and safe, but also electric, all at the same time." She trailed off, her cheeks burning, feeling like she had revealed too much. She had just described her feelings for Maya, perfectly and completely. Maya was silent for so long that Clara started to panic, her mind racing with all the ways she might have misstepped. Had she said too much? Did she sound crazy? Then, in the dimness, Maya's hand moved across the space between them, her fingers tentatively finding Clara's. The contact was hesitant at first, just the tips of her fingers brushing against Clara's palm. Clara's entire body went rigid. Time seemed to slow down. She could feel the warmth of Maya's skin, the slight tremor in her touch. Slowly, deliberately, Maya's fingers intertwined with hers. It was not a casual touch. It was not the fleeting brush of hands they had shared 1,000 times before. This was different. This was intentional. This was a question. Clara's heart felt like it was going to explode. Her mind was a chaotic storm of joy and terror. She responded instinctively, her fingers curling around Maya's, holding on. It was an answer. They lay like that for what felt like an eternity, their hands clasped in the space between them, a silent conversation passing through their linked fingers. The air crackled with unspoken words, with years of suppressed emotion, with the terrifying, beautiful possibility of something new. "Clara," Maya whispered again, her voice thick with an emotion Clara couldn't decipher. "I'm here," Clara breathed. "I think," Maya started, then stopped. She squeezed Clara's hand. "I think I've been so blind." The words settled over Clara, a gentle weight. She didn't know exactly what they meant, not yet, but they were filled with a fragile, burgeoning hope. She squeezed Maya's hand back, a silent promise. "I'm here. I'll wait. I'll help you see." Eventually, their breathing synchronized, their clasped hands a warm anchor in the darkness. For the first time in a long time, the frantic bird in Clara's chest was still. It wasn't caged anymore. It was just resting, waiting. And for the first time, Clara allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, it was waiting for a signal to finally fly free. Sleep came not as an escape, but as a gentle surrender to a world that had suddenly, irrevocably changed. The days that followed were a delicate dance. Maya stayed in Clara's bed for 3 more nights, and each night their hands found each other in the dark, a silent reaffirmation of the shift that had occurred between them. During the day, they moved around each other with a new, tender awareness. The grief of Maya's breakup was still present, a soft, melancholy haze, but it was now interwoven with something else, something tentative and hopeful. The physical contact escalated in small, incremental ways. A hug in the kitchen would last a few seconds longer than usual. When they sat on the sofa to watch a movie, Maya would tuck her feet under Clara's leg, her head eventually finding its way to Clara's shoulder. Clara's entire existence became a state of heightened sensory awareness. She was conscious of the warmth of Maya's knee pressed against hers, the soft brush of her hair against her cheek, the way her fingers would unconsciously trace patterns on Clara's arm. Each touch was a spark, sending a cascade of electricity through Clara's veins. It was a sweet, agonizing torture. Her body sang with a joy her mind was too terrified to fully embrace. She was living in the fantasy she had so often played out in her head, but it was fragile, undefined. They hadn't spoken about it, not directly. The late-night conversations continued, becoming more and more intimate, more and more revealing. One evening, they were sitting on the floor of the living room, surrounded by takeout containers and a bottle of cheap red wine. The mood was lighter than it had been in weeks. Maya had spent the afternoon painting, her first time picking up a brush since the breakup, and the creative energy had revitalized her. A genuine, unforced smile played on her lips. "It's weird," Maya said, swirling the wine in her glass. "I thought I would be a complete wreck. And I was at first. But now, I mostly just feel relieved." "That's not weird at all," Clara said softly, her gaze fixed on Maya's face, illuminated by the flickering candlelight from the coffee table. "It means you know, deep down, that it was the right thing." Maya looked at her, her honey-colored eyes searching Clara's. "I think I knew it was wrong for a long time. I was just playing a role. The good girlfriend. The one who is understanding and patient. I was so focused on being the person I thought he wanted me to be, I forgot to ask if he was the person I wanted." She took a sip of wine, her gaze dropping to Clara's lips for a fraction of a second before darting away. Clara's breath caught. She had seen it. A flicker of movement, a momentary lapse in control. It was so fast, she might have imagined it, but the sudden, frantic beating of her own heart told her it was real. "What kind of person do you want?" Clara asked, her voice a little shaky. Maya set her glass down, her expression turning serious, vulnerable. "I want what you described the other night," she said, her voice low. "I want the easy thing. The coming home thing. I want someone who I don't have to translate myself for. Someone who already speaks my language." The intensity of her gaze was overwhelming. Clara felt pinned by it, her secrets laid bare. It felt like a confession, even though no names had been spoken. The air between them was thick with electricity, a gathering storm. Clara could almost taste the ozone. But the moment passed. Maya seemed to catch herself, a faint blush rising on her cheeks. She looked away, picking at a loose thread on the rug. The spell was broken, but the residual magic lingered in the air. This became their new pattern. They would dance on the edge of a confession, inching closer and closer to the precipice, only for one of them, usually Maya, to pull back at the last second. Clara understood. Maya was reevaluating her entire life, her understanding of love, of herself. It was a monumental task, and Clara resolved to be patient. She had waited this long, she could wait a little longer. But the waiting was taking its toll. Living in this liminal space, halfway between friendship and something more, was exhausting. The constant hope, followed by the subtle retreat, was a brutal cycle of emotional whiplash. The proximity that had once been a dream was now a constant, painful reminder of what she couldn't have, or at least, what she didn't have yet. For her own self-preservation, she began to pull back. Just a little. She started spending more evenings at the library again, not as an escape, but as a way to find her own center, to remember who she was outside of her feelings for Maya. She needed to breathe air that wasn't saturated with their shared tension. She needed a moment of quiet to shore up her own heart, which felt increasingly fragile. She didn't expect Maya to notice. Or rather, she didn't expect her to react so strongly. After 3 days of Clara coming home late, her absence was finally addressed. She walked into the apartment one Thursday night, exhausted and emotionally drained, to find Maya waiting for she in the living room. The lights were dim, and Maya was sitting on the edge of the sofa, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She looked anxious, her brow furrowed in a way that made Clara's stomach clench. "Hey," Clara said, dropping her bag by the door. "You're up late." "We need to talk," Maya said, her voice quiet but firm. There was no preamble, no gentle easing into the conversation. Her tone sent a shiver of apprehension down Clara's spine. "Okay," Clara said slowly, walking over and sitting in the armchair opposite the sofa. She kept a deliberate distance, a buffer of space. "What's up?" Maya looked at her, her eyes searching, and for the first time, Clara saw not just confusion, but a hint of fear in them. "You've been avoiding me," she stated. It wasn't a question. "For the last 3 days. You've been hiding from me, and I want to know why." The directness of the confrontation caught Clara off guard. She had expected a gentle inquiry, not an accusation. Her defenses went up immediately. "I haven't been avoiding you," she lied, the word tasting foul. "I've just been busy. A big project at work." "Don't," Maya said, her voice sharp with hurt. "Don't lie to me, Clara. Not you. I get enough of that from everyone else. Something has changed. Between us. Ever since I stayed in your room. Things have been different. And now you're pulling away. Did I do something wrong? Did I misread something?" Clara's carefully constructed walls began to crumble. She looked at Maya's earnest, pained face, and she knew she couldn't maintain the facade. The truth was clawing its way up her throat, demanding to be heard. But fear was a powerful muzzle. "No, you didn't do anything wrong," Clara said, her voice barely a whisper. She looked down at her hands, unable to meet Maya's gaze. "It's not you. It's me." "What does that even mean?" Maya pressed, her frustration evident. She stood up and began to pace the small space in front of the sofa. That's the kind of thing people say when they're breaking up with someone. The words hung in the air, loaded with significance. Clara's head snapped up. We're not together," she said, the statement feeling ridiculously obvious and yet fundamentally untrue. "Aren't we?" Maya stopped pacing and turned to face her, her arms crossed over her chest. "What is this then? What have these last few weeks been? We hold hands in the dark. You let me sleep in your bed. We talk about things I've never talked about with anyone. You look at me sometimes, and it feels like you can see right through me. And I look at you. God, Clara, I look at you and I feel." She trailed off, shaking her head as if to clear it. "You feel what, Maya?" Clara asked, her voice trembling. She stood up, her legs unsteady. They were standing in the middle of the room now, just a few feet apart, the space between them humming with a dangerous energy. This was it. The point of no return. Maya took a deep breath, her eyes locking with Clara's. The fear was gone, replaced by a raw, terrifying vulnerability. "I feel confused," she admitted, her voice cracking. "And I feel scared. And I feel things I don't understand. Things I've never felt for anyone before. Not for Ben. Not for anyone." She took a step closer. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "About things. About my life. And I think maybe I'm not as straight as I've always thought I was." The confession landed in the quiet room with the force of a thunderclap. Clara's heart stopped, then restarted with a painful, violent lurch. It was the thing she had secretly hoped for, the possibility she had never dared to entertain, and hearing it spoken aloud was both terrifying and exhilarating. "Maya," Clara breathed, her own name a prayer on her lips. "And I think," Maya continued, her voice gaining a sliver of confidence, her gaze unwavering, "that the reason I'm feeling this way is you." She took another step, closing the remaining distance between them. She was so close now that Clara could feel the heat radiating from her skin, could see the tiny flecks of gold in her honey-brown eyes. "I've been so unhappy for so long, and I didn't know why. I thought it was me. I thought I was broken. But it wasn't me. It was that I was looking for you, but in all the wrong people." Tears welled in Clara's eyes, blurring Maya's face into a soft, beautiful watercolor. The secret she had carried for so long, the heavy, burdensome weight of her love, was suddenly not hers alone to bear. Maya's gaze dropped to Clara's lips, and this time, it lingered. There was no hesitation, no darting away. It was a clear, unmistakable statement of intent. "I've been thinking about kissing you," she whispered, the words a ghost of a sound, a seismic revelation. "I think about it all the time." The world seemed to fall away, leaving only the two of them, suspended in this moment of impossible truth. Clara's mind was a maelstrom of shock and joy and disbelief. After all this time, after all the silent pining and hopeless yearning, the world she had only ever dared to imagine in her dreams was suddenly, terrifyingly real. What if it's a mistake? The question tumbled from Clara's lips, a last gasp of the fear that had ruled her for so long. What if you're just confused and hurt from Ben, and this just ruins everything? The thought of losing their friendship, the one constant in her life, was still a paralyzing terror. Maya's expression softened, her eyes filled with a profound tenderness that made Clara's breath catch. She reached out, her hand coming up to cup Clara's cheek. Her touch was feather-light, reverent. Clara leaned into the warmth of her palm, her eyes fluttering closed for a second. Maybe, Maya whispered, her thumb gently stroking Clara's cheekbone. Maybe I am confused. Maybe this is a mistake. Her eyes were shining with unshed tears, a mirror of Clara's own. But what if it's not? What if this is the one thing I've ever done that isn't a mistake? She took a shaky breath, her gaze flicking between Clara's eyes and her lips. Just one, she pleaded softly, her voice thick with desperation and hope. One kiss. It won't matter if it's wrong. We can just forget it. Go back to how things were. But I have to know. Please, Clara. I have to know if what I'm feeling is real. The phrase, one kiss won't matter, was a beautiful, reckless lie, and they both knew it. A kiss between them would matter more than anything. It would change everything irrevocably. There would be no going back. It was a leap from the highest cliff, a dare to the universe. And looking into Maya's eyes, seeing the years of unspoken feelings reflected back at her, Clara knew she was done playing it safe. She was done living in the shadows of her own fear. She nodded, a small, jerky movement. It was all the permission Maya needed. The world narrowed to the space between their lips. Maya leaned in slowly, giving Clara every opportunity to pull away. Her eyes were wide, searching, asking a final, silent question. Clara held her ground, her heart hammering against her ribs like a drumbeat signaling the start of a new world. And then, their lips met. It was tentative at first, a soft, hesitant brush of mouths. It was a question, a gentle exploration. It tasted of wine and salt and years of unspoken longing. Clara's hands came up to rest on Maya's waist, her fingers gripping the soft fabric of her shirt as if to anchor herself to reality. This was real. This was happening. Maya made a soft sound in the back of her throat, a sigh of wonder and relief, and the kiss deepened. The initial hesitation melted away, replaced by a certainty that was breathtaking. Her hand moved from Clara's cheek to the back of her neck, her fingers tangling in her hair, pulling her closer. This was not the kiss of a confused person. This was the kiss of someone who had finally come home. Clara's mind went blissfully, blessedly blank. All the fear, all the anxiety, all the years of pining and pain dissolved in the overwhelming, electrifying sensation of Maya's lips on hers. It was everything she had ever imagined and so much more. It was soft and searching, then urgent and hungry. It was a conversation without words, a story of two souls finally finding their counterpart. It was not just a physical act, it was a profound emotional release, a dam of suppressed feelings breaking and flooding the space between them. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless, their chests rising and falling in ragged unison. Maya didn't move away. She rested her forehead against Clara's, their noses brushing. Her eyes were closed, a single tear tracing a path down her temple. Oh, Maya breathed, the word a puff of air against Clara's lips. It was a sound of pure revelation. Oh, that was not a mistake. Clara opened her eyes, her own vision blurry with tears. She could feel the ghost of the kiss on her lips, a warm, tingling imprint. No, she whispered, her voice hoarse with emotion. It wasn't. Maya pulled back just enough to look at her, her honey eyes shining with a fierce, brilliant light. A slow, dazzling smile spread across her face, the first truly, uncomplicatedly happy smile Clara had seen on her in months. So, she said, her voice teasing but her eyes deadly serious. One kiss didn't matter, huh? Clara laughed, a shaky, watery sound that was filled with more joy and relief than she had ever known. It mattered, she admitted, her hands sliding from Maya's waist to wrap around her neck, pulling her close again. It mattered more than anything. Good, Maya whispered, her smile pressing against Clara's. Because I don't think I want to stop. And she kissed her again, and this time there was no hesitation, no question. There was only the beautiful, undeniable, world-altering truth of two people who had finally, after so long, found their way to each other. The ache in Clara's chest was gone, replaced by a warmth that spread through her entire body, a sun rising after a long, cold night. She was home. The aftermath of the kiss was a strange and wonderful landscape of fear and elation. They stood in the middle of the living room for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, occasionally pulling apart to look at one another as if to confirm the other was real, that the moment itself had not been a dream. The air, once thick with tension, was now filled with a shimmering, breathless wonder. I have to tell you something, Clara whispered, her voice muffled against Maya's shoulder. The secret she had carried for so long felt heavy again, but in a different way. It was no longer a burden of pain, but a truth that deserved to be shared, to be given as a gift. Maya pulled back, her hands still resting on Clara's hips, her expression open and waiting. Anything. Clara took a deep breath, gathering her courage. This isn't new for me, Maya, she said, her voice trembling slightly. What I feel for you. I've been in love with you for 2 years and 7 months. The specificity of the timeline made Maya's eyes widen. A cascade of emotions washed over her face, shock, confusion, dawning understanding, and then a look of such profound tenderness it made Clara's heart ache. 2 years, Maya breathed, her voice filled with awe. She reached up and gently tucked a stray strand of hair behind Clara's ear. All this time? While I was with Ben. All those nights I cried on your shoulder about him. A shadow of pain crossed her features. Oh, Clara. I'm so sorry. I must have hurt you so much. You didn't know, Clara said, shaking her head. And it was my choice to be there for you. I would always choose to be there for you. I needed you to know that this isn't a reaction to you and Ben breaking up. This is the foundation of my whole world. Maya's eyes filled with fresh tears, but these were not tears of sadness. They were tears of wonder. I think, she said slowly, her mind clearly working to recontextualize their entire friendship, I think on some level I knew. Or my heart knew. I didn't have the language for it. I didn't understand what I was feeling. She looked past Clara for a moment, her gaze unfocused as she pieced things together. Every time Ben and I had a fight, the only person I wanted to talk to was you. Every time something good happened, you were the first person I wanted to tell. I kept trying to make him into you. I was trying to get him to listen the way you listen, to understand me the way you understand me without me even having to speak. Her gaze refocused on Clara, sharp and clear. I was measuring him against you, she said, the realization hitting her with the force of a physical blow. I was measuring every relationship against what I had with you, and they all came up short. I just thought it was because you were my best friend. I didn't realize it was because I was in love with you too. The words, spoken so simply, so certainly, were the key that unlocked the last of Clara's fears. I was in love with you too. It was past tense and present tense all at once. It was a validation of everything she had ever felt, a rewriting of their shared history into a love story that had been happening all along, with only one of them aware of the title. So what does this mean? Clara asked, the practical, terrifying question that had been hovering at the edge of her joy. What do we do now? I'm scared, Maya admitted instantly, her vulnerability a mirror of Clara's own. This is new. And big. And I don't know what I'm doing. Me too, Clara confessed, her relief at the shared fear palpable. I'm terrified. Good, Maya said, a small smile playing on her lips. Then we can be terrified together, she squeezed Clara's hips gently. I think what we do now is, we try. We figure it out. One day at a time. No pressure, no expectations. We just see what this is. But I know I don't want to go back to how things were. I can't. I don't want to go back either, Clara said, her voice firm. There's still stuff, Maya said, her brow furrowing slightly. Ben. My parents. I have a lot to figure out about myself. We'll figure it out, Clara said, echoing Maya's earlier words. Together. You don't have to do any of it alone. The promise settled between them a solid, comforting weight. It was the same promise they had always made as friends, but now it was imbued with a new, deeper meaning. They were a we now in a way they had never been before. That night, when they climbed into Clara's bed, there was no chasm of space between them. Maya turned to her immediately, her arm draping over Clara's waist, her head finding the curve of Clara's shoulder. Clara wrapped her own arms around Maya, holding her close, her nose buried in the soft, clean scent of her hair. There were no more hesitant, clasped hands in the darkness. There was only the full, solid, comforting weight of Maya's body pressed against hers. Is this okay? Maya whispered against her collarbone. It's more than okay, Clara murmured, pressing a soft kiss to the top of her head. It's perfect. For the first time in 2 years, 7 months, and a handful of incredibly long days, Clara fell asleep instantly, her heart quiet and full, her body anchored by the woman she loved. The world had tilted, yes, but it had finally settled into place. She was no longer falling. She had landed. 3 months later, the world was painted in the brilliant hues of late autumn. The air was crisp, and the leaves on the trees outside their apartment window were a riot of red, orange, and gold. Inside, a new, comfortable rhythm had established itself, as natural and easy as breathing. Clara woke slowly, drawn from sleep by the rich, warm scent of coffee. She stretched, her limbs feeling heavy and relaxed, a pleasant soreness settling deep in her muscles from the laughter of the night before. She opened her eyes to the soft morning light filtering through the curtains of her their bedroom. The other side of the bed was empty, but the pillow still held the indentation of Maya's head and her faint, familiar scent of vanilla and lavender. She smiled, a slow, lazy smile that reached her eyes. She swung her legs out of bed, pulling on one of Maya's old, paint-splattered sweatshirts that had become a staple of her morning wardrobe. She padded out of the bedroom and into the kitchen, the floorboards cool beneath her bare feet. Maya was standing at the counter, her back to Clara, humming softly to a song playing quietly from her phone. She was wearing a pair of Clara's gray sweatpants and a tank top, her dark hair piled into a messy bun on top of her head. A large canvas was propped against the far wall, a half-finished swirl of vibrant blues and fiery golds, a testament to the creative energy that had returned to Maya in full force. Clara leaned against the doorframe, just watching for a moment, her heart swelling with a love so profound it felt like it might overflow. This was her life now. This quiet, domestic bliss. Waking up to the smell of coffee and the sight of the woman she loved, happy and at peace in their shared space. The memory of the angst, the pining, the painful nights of listening to stories about Ben felt like a scene from a black-and-white movie about someone else's life. Maya turned, a mug in each hand, and her face broke into that dazzling smile that still had the power to steal Clara's breath. "Morning, sleepyhead," she said, her voice warm and laced with affection. "Morning," Clara replied, walking over and wrapping her arms around Maya from behind, resting her chin on her shoulder. She pressed a kiss to the side of her neck. "You're being productive already." "Inspiration struck," Maya said, leaning back into the embrace. She handed Clara a mug. The warmth seeped into Clara's cold hands. "Besides, I wanted to have coffee ready for you. I know how much you hate mornings without it." It was such a small thing, a simple gesture, but it was everything. It was the knowing, the caring, the effortless intimacy that had blossomed between them. The past 3 months had been a journey of discovery. There had been difficult conversations, moments of fear and uncertainty as Maya navigated telling her family and untangling the last vestiges of her old life. But through it all, they had held on to each other, a constant, unwavering source of support. They had talked for hours, unspooling their histories, their fears, their dreams, building a new foundation that was stronger than anything Clara could have imagined. Clara took a sip of her coffee, the taste rich and perfect. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice thick with more than just gratitude for the coffee. Maya turned in her arms to face her, her hands coming up to cup Clara's face. Her honey-colored eyes were clear and bright, full of a love that was so open and honest it still made Clara feel dizzy. "What for?" "For seeing me," Clara said simply. "For being brave enough to leap." Maya's expression softened. "You leaped with me," she whispered, her thumb stroking Clara's cheek. "And you were waiting for me on the other side." "I was the one who was blind for so long." She leaned in and kissed her, a slow, sweet morning kiss that tasted of coffee and home. "I'm just glad my eyes are finally open. I don't want to miss another second." They stood there in the quiet kitchen, the morning sun slanting across the floor, and Clara felt a sense of profound peace settle over her. The frantic bird in her chest no longer existed. It had flown free, and in its place was a steady, warm glow. The ache was gone, replaced by a feeling of wholeness she had never known was possible. She understood now that love wasn't about the grand, dramatic gestures she read about in books. It was about this. It was about the quiet moments, the shared mornings, the intuitive understanding. It was about finding the person who spoke your soul's language, who made the most mundane parts of life feel extraordinary. Sometimes the most beautiful love stories were not the ones that started with a lightning bolt, but the ones that grew quietly, patiently, in the familiar soil of friendship, waiting for the right season to bloom. And their love, Clara knew, had been worth every second of the wait. It was real, it was true, and it was just beginning. She pulled Maya closer, a silent promise to cherish every sunrise, every cup of coffee, every single moment of this beautiful, unexpected life they were building together. She was exactly where she needed to be.